Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding another hearing on a critical topic. I will say we haven't made much progress. And, with all due respect to what we just heard about some of the new approaches that are being taken, I think it's hard for us to sit here this morning and say that ISIS is in fact being contained, which is what the administration has said on occasion. Of course, ISIS was also called the JV, and ISIS was called a bunch of guys in a truck. I think that was all misleading rhetoric, and sadly, if you look at what's happened, you have to say ISIS continues to grow. It continues to grow in a lot of respects. One is a destabilizing effect in the Middle East, well beyond Syria now. Obviously, we're once again trying to retake Fallujah, and we have more and more military assets going into Iraq after precipitously pulling out of Iraq. I think you have to also say they further destabilized Europe. The chairman talked about the number of refugees that have moved to Europe, many illegally, and we see what's happened, obviously, with attacks in Paris and Belgium, but it's well beyond that. ISIS also poses a greater threat to the United States based on everything that we're hearing in public testimony, and I assume you two would not disagree with that it's a greater threat today than it was last time we held a hearing. Their ability to reach out to people continues to grow. When you look at what's happening on the internet and the real social media communication that's going on, we're losing the battle. And so my only concern about the back and forth this morning, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Mayorkas, as he knows, and Mr. Zibro, I don't know you, but it looks like you've got a good background. You're doing your best, but I think there's not a sense of urgency here. And I think, it's right that we have passed some legislation here out of this committee that can be helpful. It's correct that we did provide some more funds for some of these important uses, but I would say on all three levels, as I see them, one is the military level, really going after ISIS, particularly in Syria and Iraq. I do not believe we're doing what we should be doing to be more aggressive, to be able to take out their ability to attack us and attack Europe and other places. Second, on the border security front, we continue to have gaps, and, as the FBI director told us in this committee, we have serious gaps in intelligence to be able to know who the Syrian refugees are who come to this country, and yet they're coming. And then finally, I think perhaps the most important area, the one we haven't yet been able to figure out, is this, what I would say, counterterrorism communication, to put it broadly, and specifically online. And I looked at some recent data. We are facing a very effective opponent online. They have a very slick narrative. We see, when we're asked to look at some of the ISIS propaganda online, we tend to see the stuff that has to do with violence and extremism. Here's a report that we got recently, a single month this summer, 52% of the nearly 900 propaganda messages that ISIS sent out were focused on quality of life issues, 37% hit military themes, and only 2% touched on brutality or violence. So they're sophisticated. They are reaching out to alienated youth in the West and elsewhere. We see this. I mean, I don't think we can say that there are fewer jihadists going to the Middle East, can we? I mean, I think it's increasing. The number of foreign fighters is increasing. So I guess what I would say this morning is, what are we doing that is responding to this increased capability they have, to the urgency of this problem? I mean, what would you say is the most important thing we should be doing? I noticed, Mr. Zibro, you talked about the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. We've talked about the Countering Violent Extremism effort at Department of Homeland Security. We've talked about the Office of Community Partnerships. You talked about Director George Salem this morning. I know these are nascent groups. They're all about a year old or less, I think, at the State Department. I assume the State Department started this new group because the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communication was not working well, had not provided the kind of counter messaging that you had hoped. Are you all working together? And I think it's great that there's a unity of effort now at the Department of Homeland Security. Is there unity of effort in terms of our government? And would you say, and maybe I'll ask you, Mr. Zibro, first, would you say that we are effectively countering this messaging we've talked about this morning?
Thank you, Senator. The coordination among and within our government on this issue is definitely strengthening. It's a major challenge. I would agree with you that ISIL's use of propaganda, the use of social media and the internet to propagate their message and to use the internet as a very effective tool to recruit new members really has been unprecedented, and it's not something that we've seen used as effectively by any other group previously. I think their message has been blunted. That narrative of victory they relied upon so successfully in their early period of recruitment, if you think in the 2014, early 2015 era. There's been significant losses that ISIL has suffered. That narrative of victory has been blunted somewhat. They're not delivering effectively on governance. And you noted the statistics on they're focused on 52% of their messaging on quality of life. Well, they've suffered in their ability to provide that quality of life. And the Global Engagement Center is a new effort. It is intended to build broad networks globally to coordinate messaging against.
How long has it been up and running?
Just since earlier this year, there was a new executive order that authorized the establishment of the Global Engagement Center.
Do we still have the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communication?
No.
And why not?
It's been folded into the Global Engagement Center.
Yeah. So you were suggesting that their narrative is less compelling now because they've had fewer victories and because they can't focus as much on quality of life issues. Does this mean there are fewer foreign fighters that are being attracted to the Middle East?
Well, the cumulative number of foreign fighters is something is unprecedented. And that's something we've never seen in any previous conflict.
Let me restate the question. Are you saying that it is effective in what we're actually all looking for, which is fewer foreign fighters, fewer of these, let's say, alienated youth from the Western countries, particularly being attracted to the Middle East? Is that happening?
We believe there has been a decrease in the number of foreign fighters traveling to the conflict, yes.
So you think there's a decrease in the number of foreign fighters?
Yes.
Can you give me any information on that in a follow-up communication as to why you think that and what your numbers are based on?
I'd be happy to do that. I think these are numbers and conclusions that also come out of our intelligence community, their observations of less force strength of ISIL.
So you would disagree with me this morning. You think we are turning the tide. You think there are fewer foreign fighters coming into the Middle East and therefore less of a risk to the United States?
I think that there has been a decrease in foreign fighter entry into the Syria-Iraq conflict, but there's been an increase in other places, Libya as an example. There are other places that ISIL does continue to attract new adherents, new followers. They continue, as you pointed out, to associate themselves with existing insurgencies, and that is a problem. It's not something that's localized in Iraq and Syria. As you've noted, it's a global phenomenon that we have to confront around the world, not simply in one single place, as difficult as that is.
I think it would be misleading based on other administration officials who have testified in public. I'm not talking about our classified briefings to say that we're making progress, to say that it is decreasing, but I'd love to see your statistics on that and where you get them. Secretary Mayorkas, would you say that DHS is communicating directly and coordinating with this new GEC office, the Global Engagement Center?
Senator, I am not particularly familiar with that aspect of our communication on the international front. My focus has been domestically, countering the violent extremism messaging of ISIL as it is targeted to the homeland. And I would have to defer to my experts in the international arena.
Well, my time has expired, and I got to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me. I guess what I would say is this subcommittee, I think this committee would be very interested in knowing what the coordination is between state and DHS. Let's face it, social media is not subject to boundaries. And so the same people you're trying to address in those communities are the same people who are hearing this message overseas. And I would hope that we could have better communication within our government with a unity of purpose.